This letter must not fall into the wrong hands.
Do you understand the gravity of the situation?
She ran. Her slippers hit the marble floor so hard the sound cracked through the empty corridor like a gunshot. She did not look back. She could not. The candlelight flickered as she passed, and the shadows on the wall stretched after her like hands reaching. She had taken the letter. That was all. One letter. Folded, sealed, tucked inside a man's coat pocket at a ball she was never supposed to attend. And now 3 of Lord Fenwick's men were somewhere behind her in this house, and none of them were the kind to ask questions first. Her name was Ivy Sutton. She was the second daughter of a disgraced barrister, and she had just stolen evidence that could bring down one of the most powerful men in England. She had no plan. She had no weapon. She had only her feet and the dark. She turned the corner hard and slammed directly into a wall of black. Strong hands caught her before she hit the floor. One arm wrapped around her waist. The other came up fast and pressed firmly across her lips. A voice came low, close to her ear. Barely a breath of sound. Quiet, or they'll find us. She went absolutely still. The man holding her pulled them both backward, through a door she had not even seen. A servant's passage, hidden behind a tapestry of hunting dogs and oak trees. The door sealed shut without a sound. The darkness inside was total. She could feel his heartbeat against her back, steady and controlled, while her own was hammering so hard she thought it might give them away on its own. Footsteps came, heavy. 3 sets. They moved down the corridor just outside, paused, then continued past. Neither of them breathed. When the footsteps faded, the hand at her mouth slowly dropped. She spun around. Even in the dark, she could feel the sheer height of him, the weight of his presence, the way the small space seemed to rearrange itself around him. "Who are you?" she whispered. A beat of silence. Then, from the darkness, calm and unbothered, like a man who had done this before and expected to do it again, the Duke of Harlan. "And you, Miss Sutton, are holding something that will get us both killed before morning." Before moving on, where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. Now, let's begin. Ivy's fingers closed tighter around the letter inside her bodice. He could not know about it. No one was supposed to know she had taken it. She had been careful. She had been so careful. She had lifted it from Lord Fenwick's coat while he stood laughing at his own joke, surrounded by admirers, not even glancing down. She had walked away slowly, calmly, with her hands folded in front of her like a woman who had nothing to hide and nowhere urgent to be. And yet here was a duke, in the dark, saying her name like he already knew the shape of her trouble. "You have the wrong person," she said. "No," he replied. "I have exactly the right one." His voice did not rise. It did not soften either. It sat somewhere in between, flat and certain, the voice of a man who had never once needed to shout to be obeyed. She hated it immediately. She also believed it, which made her hate it more. She pressed her back against the wall of the narrow passage. The stone was cold through the thin fabric of her gown. The Duke of Harlan stood 2 feet from her, and even with nothing but darkness between them, she could feel him watching her the way a hawk watches something small moving through tall grass. "How do you know my name?" she asked. "I have been watching Fenwick's household for 6 weeks, he said. "I know the name of every person who has entered that ballroom tonight. I know which ones belong there and which ones do not." A pause. "You do not." She said nothing. You came with Lady Prentice, he continued. Her invitation covered 3 guests, her niece, her companion, and her dressmaker. You are not her niece. Her companion is 40 and walks with a cane. That leaves the dressmaker. His eyes found hers in the dark somehow. A dressmaker who moves through a crowded room like someone who has been trained to go unnoticed, who positions herself near the most powerful men without appearing to, who reaches into a coat pocket and removes its contents in under 4 seconds without the owner flinching. Ivy said nothing for a long moment. Then, you were watching me. I was watching him. You stepped into my line of sight and did something I was not expecting. And what was that? You succeeded, he said. My own man tried to get close to Fenwick 3 nights ago and came away with nothing. You walked in tonight without a title, without connections, and without a weapon. And you took the one thing in that room I have been trying to get my hands on for 2 months. Ivy studied the dark shape of him. The Duke of Harlan. She knew the name. Everyone in England knew the name. Silas Harlan, the 8th Duke of his line, unmarried, formidable, and largely absent from the social calendar most lords lived and breathed for. He was spoken of in parlours the way storms were spoken of, with a kind of nervous respect by people who had never actually stood in one. She was currently standing in one. What do you want? She asked. The letter, he said, and a conversation, in that order. No, she said. He did not react the way she expected. He did not step forward. He did not threaten. He tilted his head slightly and said, The 3 men who just walked past this door work directly for Fenwick. They are not footmen. They are not hired for their table manners. If they find you before you reach the street, the letter will not be your most pressing problem. Ivy knew he was right. She had known the moment she took the letter that the window for safe exit was small. She had planned to be out of the house before Fenwick noticed anything was wrong. That plan had collapsed approximately 11 minutes ago, when one of those men had looked directly at her across the card room, and something in his face had shifted. She had run, and she had run directly into Silas Harlan. Even if I give you the letter, she said, I still have to get out of this house. Yes, he said, and you are offering to help with that. I am. Why? He was quiet for a moment. Not the quiet of someone thinking, the quiet of someone choosing how much to say. Or because the contents of that letter concern me as much as they concern you. More, perhaps. And because I need to know who sent you here tonight and what they told you about what you were looking for. Ivy felt a slow, careful shift in her thinking. Someone had sent her. That was true. A woman named Mrs. Croft, who ran a small printing house off a back lane near the river, who had come to Ivy 4 days ago with a purse of coins and a very specific set of instructions. Find the letter, bring it back, ask nothing. Ivy had asked plenty. Mrs. Croft had answered little, but the coins had been real, and the rent on her mother's house was 3 weeks overdue, and her younger sister Polly had been coughing since November. She had taken the job. She had not, until this exact moment, considered the full reach of what she had walked into. If I give you the letter, she said slowly, what happens to the people who sent me? Something moved across his face. She could not see it clearly, but she felt the temperature of the conversation change. That depends entirely on who they are, he said. That is not a reassuring answer. It is an honest one. Outside the passage, somewhere down the corridor, a door opened. Voices, low, purposeful, moving closer. Silas turned his head toward the sound. His whole body changed. The stillness became something sharper, more alert. He looked back at her. "We need to move," he said. "I have not agreed to anything yet. You can disagree with me at length once we are not about to be discovered." He reached past her to the far end of the passage where she had not even noticed a second door. His hand found a latch. "Or there is a side courtyard through here. My carriage is on the street that runs behind it. We go now, quickly, and we do not stop." She looked at him. She looked at the door. The voices outside were close enough now that she could make out words. One of the men said Fenwick's name. Another one said something about a girl in green. Ivy was wearing green. She moved. Silas opened the door and she went through first, into the cold night air. The courtyard was small and dark, lit only by a sliver of moonlight cutting over the rooftop above them. There was a low stone wall at the far end, then a lane, and beyond that, the outline of a black carriage standing without lamps. She crossed the courtyard fast. He was behind her, close, matching her pace without effort. She reached the wall and he was already there, hands laced together, as offering a step without being asked. She put her foot in his hands, and he lifted her cleanly over the wall. She landed on the other side and turned to find him already coming over behind her. They crossed the lane. A coachman at the front of the carriage straightened when he saw the Duke, but said nothing. The carriage door was opened. Ivy climbed in. Silas followed. The door shut. The carriage moved. Inside it was dark and warm and very quiet. The wheels rolled over cobblestone with a low, steady rhythm. Ivy sat on one side, Silas on the other. Neither spoke for a moment. Then she reached into her bodice and took out the letter. She held it between them. He did not reach for it immediately. He looked at it, then at her. "You are trusting me," he said. "I am testing you," she replied. "There is a difference." He took the letter carefully, or he broke the seal. In the thin light from the carriage window, he read it, and as he read, the expression on his face didn't change, but something behind his eyes did. She watched it happen. Whatever was written on that paper landed in him like a stone dropped into very still water. He folded it again. He held it in both hands. He looked up. "Miss Sutton," he said quietly, "how much did they tell you about what this letter contains?" "Nothing," she said. "I was told only to retrieve it." "And if I told you that the contents of this letter name 3 members of the King's Privy Council as participants in a conspiracy to remove the Crown's chief legal adviser by means that are not legal, and that Lord Fenwick is the man funding every part of it, would you understand why his men were willing to chase a woman in green through a darkened house tonight?" Ivy stared at him. She understood quite a lot of things suddenly. She understood why Mrs. Croft had paid so generously. She understood why she had been given instructions so thin they were nearly transparent. She understood that she had been used as a tool by someone who expected her either to succeed and disappear, or fail and be discarded. She also understood that the man sitting across from her in this carriage, holding a letter that could shake the foundations of the English government, was not simply a duke with a passing interest in political scandal. "Who are you really?" she asked. He looked at her with something that was not quite a smile, and not quite anything else. Someone who has been trying to stop this for a very long time," he said, "and who, as of tonight, finds himself in need of a partner who is apparently very good at going unnoticed. Outside, London rolled past in the dark. Somewhere behind them, Lord Fenwick's men were still searching. And inside the carriage, between a disgraced barrister's daughter and one of the most powerful men in England, something that had no name yet was quietly beginning. The carriage stopped on a street Ivy did not recognize. It was not a grand street. No polished brass door knockers, no footmen standing at attention outside lit entrances. It was narrow and quiet, with old brick buildings pressed close together and a single gas lamp throwing pale light over wet cobblestones, the kind of street that did not appear on the maps wealthy people consulted. Silas stepped out first and offered his hand. She took it without thinking, and then immediately wished she had not, because the brief warmth of his grip did something to her composure that she could not afford right now. She released his hand the moment her feet touched the ground. A man was waiting at the door of the nearest building. He was short, broad across the shoulders, with a red beard that had been trimmed recently but not well. He looked at Ivy the way people looked at unexpected weather. Not hostile, simply unprepared. "This was not the plan," he said to Silas. "The plan changed," Silas replied, moving past him through the door. Ivy followed. The man with the red beard fell into step behind her. She noted that. He was not leading. He was making sure she did not run. She filed that information away and kept walking. Inside, the building was nothing like its exterior suggested. The ground floor was a single large room filled with tables, and the tables were covered with papers, maps, opened books with pages marked, and small glass lamps burning low. 3 other people were already in the room when they entered. The first was a woman. Tall, sharp-jawed, with dark hair pulled back so severely it looked like a statement. Or she was standing over one of the tables reading something, and she did not look up when they came in. The second was a young man, no older than 20, with ink-stained fingers and the slightly unfocused look of someone who had been awake for too many consecutive hours. He looked up immediately, and then looked at Ivy with open curiosity. The third was older, 60s perhaps, silver-haired, with the upright posture of a former military man and the careful eyes of someone who trusted no one easily, and had excellent reasons for that policy. Silas closed the door behind them. "The letter is secured," he said to the room. The tall woman finally looked up. Her gaze went to the letter in Silas's hand, and then to Ivy, and she said nothing for a moment, which managed to communicate a great deal. "She took it," Silas said simply, "or from Fenwick's pocket," the red-bearded man added from behind Ivy, sounding slightly disbelieving still, "at the ball." The young man with the ink stains let out a breath that was almost a laugh. The older man did not change expression at all. The tall woman said, "Who is she?" "Ivy Sutton," Silas said. "She was hired by someone to retrieve the letter. She did not know its full contents. She does now." "You told her," the tall woman said. It was not a question. "Yes. That was not your decision to make alone. It became my decision when she was 30 seconds from being caught by Fenwick's men, and I needed her to understand the stakes quickly." He set the letter on the nearest table. "We can debate it later. Right now, we need to talk about what comes next." Ivy stood in the middle of all of this and said nothing. She was watching. She was cataloguing. The tall woman had authority here, or believed she did. The older man deferred to Silas but watched the woman. The young man watched everyone. The red-bearded man was security. He had moved to stand near the door again without being told. These were not random people. They were organized. They had been working on something together for long enough that they had assigned roles and unspoken rules. "My name is Constance Vale," the tall woman said, directing it at Ivy now. "I will not pretend this introduction is comfortable for either of us. You were brought here without being asked, and you know things that make you a risk. I would like to understand exactly how large that risk is before we continue." "I would like to understand the same thing about this room," Ivy replied. Constance looked at her for a long moment, and then something shifted very slightly at the corner of her mouth. Not warmth exactly. Recognition, perhaps. "Fair," she said. The older man spoke then. His voice was low and measured. "My name is Admiral Bertram Coyle. Retired. What you retrieved tonight is the confirmation of something we have suspected for nearly a year. Fenwick is not acting alone. He has 3 men inside the Privy Council helping him reshape legal appointments in this country in ways that will take a generation to undo if they are not stopped now." "And the letter proves it?" Ivy asked. "The letter is one piece," Coyle said. "It names the 3 men. It outlines the agreement between them. It establishes Fenwick as the source of the funding. But a letter alone, however damning, is not enough to act on. It can be claimed as forgery. It can be dismissed. We need the secondary evidence that corroborates it." "Which is where?" Ivy asked. "Fenwick's private study," the ink-stained young man said. Everyone looked at him. He straightened slightly. "His name is Oliver Petch," he added, apparently introducing himself to Ivy, since no one else had bothered. "I handle documents, and the secondary evidence, based on everything we have mapped, should be inside a locked box in Fenwick's private study on the 2nd floor of his Mayfair house, which is not the house we were just in tonight. The ball was at his winter residence." "He has 2 houses," Ivy said. "He has 4, Oliver said, "but the study we need is at the Mayfair address." Ivy turned back to Silas. He was watching her with that same hawk stillness she had noticed in the hidden passage, waiting to see what she would do with all of this. "Oh, you want me to go back," she said. "Not to the winter residence, to the Mayfair house." "We want to discuss it," Constance said firmly, casting a look at Silas. "Yes," Silas said, ignoring Constance entirely. "We want you to go back." Constance set down the paper she had been holding. "Silas." "She got further into Fenwick's circle tonight than any of us have in 6 weeks, he said. "She is not known to him. She has a cover that is already established. She is skilled, and she is quick, and she does not panic." He looked at Ivy when he said that last part. "We would be foolish not to ask. We would also be reckless to ask without explaining the full danger," Coyle said. "Then let us explain it," Silas said. "All of it. And let her decide." The room went quiet. Ivy looked at each of them in turn. Oliver was watching her with that open curiosity again. Coyle was expressionless. Constance was measuring. The red-bearded man, whose name she still did not know, was looking at the floor. "What is your name?" she asked him. He looked up, surprised. "Denny," he said. "Denny Marsh." She nodded. She turned back to the table with the letter on it and looked at it for a moment. Then she pulled out the chair nearest her and sat down. "Tell me everything," she said. "From the beginning. Leave nothing out. And when you are finished, I will tell you what I am willing to do and what I am not, and we will go from there." Silas sat down across from her. Constance sat beside him. Coyle remained standing. Oliver grabbed a stool and pulled it close. Denny Marsh stayed by the door. And then the Admiral began to talk. But he had a voice built for quiet rooms and serious information. He spoke without drama or embellishment, which made everything he said land harder than it might have otherwise. He told her about a man named Sir Hugh Grantley, the Crown's chief legal advisor, who had spent 15 years carefully dismantling the structures that allowed men like Fenwick to buy their way around the law. He told her about the 3 Privy Council members whose names appeared in the letter: Lord Darcy, Lord Mableton, and a man named Sir Piers Ashby, who sat on the Judiciary Committee and had been quietly redirecting certain cases away from thorough examination for the better part of 2 years. He told her what Fenwick wanted in return for his funding. Not money, not title. Power over appointments. The ability to place his chosen men inside the legal and governmental structures that shaped what could and could not be prosecuted in England. To build, slowly and invisibly, a version of the law that protected people like him and exposed everyone else. He told her that if Grantley was removed and Fenwick's network was not exposed first, the groundwork Grantley had built would be quietly dismantled within 18 months. And no one outside this room and a handful of others would ever know it had happened. When Coyle finished, the room was very quiet. Ivy sat with all of it sitting in her chest. It was heavy. She had expected something serious when she took the job from Mrs. Croft. She had not expected this scale. This was not a personal scandal. This was not embarrassing information about a powerful man's private life. This was architecture. Someone was trying to rebuild the way justice worked in England from the inside, and they were doing it carefully and patiently and almost invisibly. Mrs. Croft, she said, the woman who hired me. Who is she? Coyle and Silas exchanged a look. She works with us, Silas said. She is part of the outer ring. She identifies people with skills we need and brings them in for specific tasks. She did not tell you the full picture because we were not yet certain the letter existed in the form we believed it did. She used me as a test, Ivy said. She used you as an asset, Silas said carefully. That is the same thing. He did not argue with that. Ivy looked at the letter on the table. She thought about her mother's house. She thought about Polly coughing in the small bedroom at the back. She thought about the purse of coins Mrs. Croft had given her, which had felt like a solution and now felt like the first thread of a much larger knot. She also thought about Fenwick's men in that corridor, about the weight of what Coyle had described, about the idea that somewhere in a locked box in a Mayfair study was the piece of evidence that could make all of this mean something. She thought about the fact that she was already in it. There was no clean exit from a room like this on a night like this. The only direction that made any sense was forward. I need 2 things, she said. Everyone waited. I need to know that my mother and my sister will be protected while this is happening. Not promised protection. Actual protection. Someone physically present. Done, Silas said immediately. Now Constance looked at him but did not contradict. And I need to meet Sir Hugh Grantley, Ivy said, before I go anywhere near Fenwick's Mayfair house. I want to look at the man I am doing this for and decide for myself if he is worth the risk. Another look passed between Silas and Coyle. That can be arranged, Coyle said slowly. Then I am in, Ivy said. She said it simply, without theatre, the way she did most things, but she felt the weight of it settle around her like a coat put on before a long walk in cold weather. Oliver exhaled again. Denny Marsh shifted his weight by the door. Constance picked up the letter and carried it to a locked cabinet in the corner without a word. Silas looked at Ivy across the table, and for just a moment, one unguarded moment, something in his expression moved. Not the hawk, not the controlled stillness, but something else, something that looked almost like relief. He shuttered it quickly, but she had seen it. She filed that away too. The meeting with Sir Hugh Grantley was arranged for the following morning. Ivy was given a small room at the back of the building to sleep in. It had a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window that looked out onto a brick wall. She did not complain. She had slept in worse. She lay on top of the covers fully dressed, staring at the ceiling, and did not sleep at all. She was thinking about Polly. Her sister was 17 and had their father's eyes and their mother's stubbornness and a cough that had started as a small thing in the cold months and had not left when the cold did. The doctor on their street said it was nothing serious. He said it every time he came, and every time he left, Ivy felt less reassured. She had been taking every piece of work she could find for months. Sewing, alterations, dresswork for women who could afford good fabric, but not the fashionable dressmakers on the better streets. And then Mrs. Croft had come with her quiet voice and her careful instructions and her purse of real coins, and Ivy had said yes before she had finished asking. She did not regret it. She could not afford regret. But she lay in the dark and made herself a promise that whatever happened next, Polly would not pay for it. At some point before dawn, she must have slept because she woke to the sound of Oliver knocking at the door with tea and a bread roll and the information that they would be leaving in an hour. She washed her face. She smoothed her dress as best she could. She drank the tea standing up and ate the roll in 3 bites and went downstairs. Silas was already there. He was standing at the main table reading something, and coat on, entirely put together, which was faintly irritating given that she was wearing yesterday's gown and had done her own hair with 2 pins and a great deal of optimism. He looked up when she came in. "Did you sleep?" he asked. "Enough," she said. He looked at her for a moment in the way she was beginning to recognize him, deciding whether to press a point or let it go. He let it go. "Grantley is being brought to a house in Bloomsbury," he said. "He cannot be seen meeting with us openly. Fenwick has people watching his usual movements." "Fenwick is watching the man he is trying to destroy," Ivy said. "Of course he is. It means the meeting must be brief, and the location must not be connected to any of us." He folded the paper he had been reading. "We will go separately. You will arrive as a dressmaker visiting a client. That is a cover that already fits you naturally." "And you?" she asked. "I will be there when you arrive." "That is not an answer to my question." The corner of his mouth shifted. Not quite a smile. "No," he agreed. "It is not." Denny Marsh drove her in a plain carriage with no crest on the door. She watched London wake up through the window. Street sellers setting out their carts, maids on their way to market, a boy chasing a dog that had taken something from a butcher's stall. The city had no idea what was being built inside it, and it went about its morning with its usual magnificent indifference. The house in Bloomsbury was owned, Oliver had explained before she left, by a widow named Mrs. Fay Drummond, who had been quietly assisting Coyle's network for 3 years. She was 60, sharp as new scissors, and greeted Ivy at the door with the calm efficiency of a woman who had hosted clandestine meetings often enough that they had stopped being interesting. "He is in the sitting room," Mrs. Drummond said, taking Ivy's coat. "The Duke arrived 10 minutes ago." "They are already arguing." Ivy paused. "About what?" "About you," Mrs. Drummond said pleasantly, and gestured toward the hall. Ivy walked to the sitting room door, which was slightly open, and heard Silas's voice first. "She has already proven herself. Last night was not a small thing." Then another voice, older, tired and precise. "Last night was a retrieval task. What you are proposing now is infiltration. That is a different category entirely, Harlan, and you know it." "I know it," Silas said. "I also know we have no one else. We could find someone else." "In what time?" "Our Fenwick moves the box at the end of the month. We have 11 days." Silence. Ivy pushed the door open and walked in. Sir Hugh Grantley was smaller than she expected. She had built a picture of him from Coyle's description, something formidable and broad. But the man sitting in the armchair by the window was slight, with thin white hair and a face that looked like it had been worrying about something specific for approximately 15 years. His eyes were sharp, though, very sharp. They went to her immediately and assessed her in the time it took her to cross the room. Silas was standing near the fireplace. He straightened when she entered, but said nothing. "Miss Sutton?" Grantley said. "Sir Hugh," she replied. She sat down across from him without being invited to. She saw something flicker in his expression. Surprise, perhaps? That people did not generally sit without being asked in rooms with men like him. "You wanted to see me," he said. "I wanted to decide if you were worth the risk," she said. "I told the Duke that last night. I assume he passed it along." "He did." Grantley looked at her steadily. "And what will help you decide?" "Tell me something true," she said. "Not the formal version. Not the version that is designed to make me feel that what I am doing matters, and therefore I should do it willingly. Tell me something true about what is actually happening and what you are actually afraid of." The room was very quiet. Grantley looked at her for a long time. Then he looked at his hands in his lap. Then he said, "That I am afraid that I have spent 15 years building something that will outlast me, and that it will be dismantled in 18 months by men who do not care about law, only about what the law can be made to protect. I am afraid that if that happens, the people it will hurt most are the people who already have the least protection. Not men like Fenwick. Men like Fenwick will be fine regardless. It is always everyone else who pays." He paused. "That is what I am afraid of. That is the truth of it." Ivy sat with that for a moment. It was not a speech. It was not a performance. It was a tired man telling her something real. "All right," she said. She stood. "I will do it." She looked at Silas on her way to the door. He was watching her with that expression again, the one she had filed away. She did not stop walking. But behind her she heard Grantley say quietly to Silas, "Where did you find her?" And Silas, after a brief pause, "She found us." The planning began that afternoon. They gathered back at the narrow street building, all 6 of them this time, Silas, Constance, Coyle, Oliver, Denny and Ivy, around the large table with its maps and papers. Oliver had drawn a detailed floor plan of Fenwick's Mayfair house from memory, supplemented by information from a housemaid named Bess, who had left Fenwick's service 2 months ago, after an incident she had declined to elaborate on, but which had left her very willing to answer questions about the layout of the building. The study was on the second floor, east wing, third door from the main landing. The locked box was kept in a cabinet behind a false panel in the left wall. But Oliver knew this because Bess had seen Fenwick retrieve something from it once and had been sharp enough to note exactly where he pressed to make the panel open. The difficulty was access. Fenwick's Mayfair house was not a social venue. He did not hold balls there. It was his working residence, where he conducted his actual business. The staff was small and loyal, which meant bought, which meant careful. Deliveries were checked. Visitors were vetted. There was no obvious cover for simply walking through the front door. "The side entrance," Ivy said. Everyone looked at her. "Tradespeople use the side entrance," she said. "I need a reason to use it that fits my cover and raises no questions. Fenwick is unmarried, but he has a household. Who manages it?" "His housekeeper," Oliver said, checking his notes. "A woman named Mrs. Orner Bates. 30 years with the family, absolutely not approachable." "Not her," Ivy said. "Who does she deal with? Who supplies the house?" Oliver flipped through pages. "Butcher, greengrocer, a laundress on Garrick Street, a seamstress named—" He stopped. "Named what?" Ivy asked. "Named Miss Tilton, but she retired last month. Illness." Ivy looked at the table. "Fenwick's household currently has no seamstress." The room absorbed this. "A new seamstress," Constance said slowly. "Recommended by someone the housekeeper trusts." "Who does the housekeeper trust?" Ivy asked. "The greengrocer," Oliver said, looking back through his notes. "A man named Patch on Cavell Street. She has used him for 11 years, and he sends a gift of preserved fruit every Christmas." Silas was looking at Ivy. "Then we need someone who knows Patch." "Denny knows everyone," Oliver said. Denny Marsh nodded from the door. "I know Patch. He is a decent man. He will not lie for us, but he will pass along a recommendation if it is put to him the right way." "Put it to him," Ivy said. "You are planning this yourself," Constance observed. Her tone was not quite critical, but it was watching. "I am the one going in," Ivy said. "I would rather understand the plan from the inside." Constance looked at Silas. Silas looked at Ivy. Something passed between Ivy and Silas that had no words attached to it, and Constance caught and filed away behind her sharp eyes. They spent 3 more hours on the details. Ivy would present herself as a seamstress seeking new clients, recommended by Patch, available for alterations and household mending on short notice. A small collection of real tools and fabric samples would be assembled so that she was carrying genuine equipment. Oliver would prepare a false name and a false address that would hold up to a surface check. The cover needed to be thin enough to be believable and thick enough to survive a suspicious housekeeper. Her name for the purpose of the job would be Miss Nora Webb. She practiced it twice that evening when Oliver asked her a string of test questions. "Where are you from? How long have you been in the trade? Who are your previous clients?" She answered each one without hesitation. Oliver looked pleased. Constance looked like she was withholding judgment. Coyle looked the same as he always did. Silas watched. Late that evening, when the others had dispersed to various tasks, Ivy was sitting alone at the table with Oliver's floor plan of the Mayfair house. She was studying the route from the side entrance to the east wing staircase, memorizing it, testing it for problems. Silas sat down across from her. She did not look up. "You are going to tell me to be careful," she said. I was going to tell you that the cabinet panel requires a specific amount of pressure applied slightly left of center, he said. Oliver confirmed the details with Bess this afternoon. You press too far right and the mechanism does not engage. She looked up. He held her gaze. Thank you, she said. Also, he said, and now there was something in his voice that was different from all the other times he had spoken. Quieter, more careful. I want you to know that the 2 conditions you set last night have both been arranged, or your mother and sister have had someone posted near their house since this morning, and the meeting with Grantley happened because I believed you when you asked for it. Ivy looked at him for a moment. You did not have to tell me that second part, she said. No, he agreed. I did not. She looked back down at the floor plan, but the silence between them had changed. It had weight now, the kind of weight that did not come from danger or strategy or the business of what they were doing together. She was aware of exactly how close he was sitting. She did not move away. Neither did he. The appointment at Fenwick's Mayfair house was set for Thursday at 10:30. Patch the greengrocer had been approached by Denny on Tuesday morning, and the thing had been handled with the simplicity that comes from a man with a genuinely good reputation recommending another person he had been told was genuinely reliable. Patch had sent word to Mrs. Orna Bates that a dressmaker of his acquaintance was available for household work and looking to expand her clients. Mrs. Bates had replied the same afternoon that she would see the woman on Thursday. Ivy spent Wednesday preparing. Oliver had assembled a proper sewing basket. Real needles, real thread in 12 colors, a small pair of proper scissors with ivory handles, fabric samples in muted tones, a measuring ribbon, everything worn slightly at the edges, suggesting regular use. Ivy added her own alterations to the setup, because Oliver had packed everything too neatly, and a working seamstress's basket was never neat. She also spent 2 hours with Constance, which surprised her. Constance came to her room mid-morning and knocked precisely twice. When Ivy opened the door, Constance came in, set down a small case, opened it, and began laying out items on the bed without preamble. Your hands, she said. Ivy held them out. Constance examined them briefly and nodded once. Good. You have the right calluses. Needlework, cutting work. That is authentic. She picked up a small jar from the case. This will dull the shine of your nails. A dressmaker does not have polished nails. She worked efficiently and without conversation for several minutes. Then, as she was applying something to Ivy's hair to take out the slight natural wave that was a touch too fashionable for the cover, she said without looking up, "He has not taken an interest in anyone in 4 years." Ivy went very still. I am not asking you to account for anything, Constance said. I am telling you something that is relevant. She continued working. Silas lost someone. Before all of this. It changed how he operates. He does not get close to people who are in danger. He keeps distance on purpose, because losing someone from a distance is survivable, and losing someone from close is not. She set down the jar. What I observed last night, and again yesterday evening, is that his distance with you is not operating normally. Ivy said nothing. I am not warning you away from him, Constance said. That I am not his keeper, and you are not a child. I am simply telling you that if he is different from you than he is with everyone else, it is not a small thing for him. Do with that what you will. She closed the case. And do not get caught tomorrow. She left. Ivy sat for a long time after she was gone. She thought about the way he had sat across from her with the floor plan between them, the way he had told her about Polly and her mother being protected, the way he said the second part when he did not have to, the way he looked at her in Grantley's sitting room when she walked in and announced her decision. She thought about 4 years of distance and what it cost a person to maintain it. She picked up the sewing basket and went back to work. Thursday came with a low grey sky and a smell of rain that had not arrived yet. Denny dropped her 2 streets from the Mayfair address at 10:15. She walked the rest. Her dress was modest and well kept, but not remarkable. Her coat was plain, her basket was on her arm. She was Miss Nora Webb, seamstress, referred to by Mr. Patch of Cavil Street, and she walked like someone with an appointment and nothing to hide. The side entrance to Fenwick's house was through a black iron gate off the lane beside the main building. She found it without hesitating, which was important. Hesitation at a servant's entrance drew attention. She knocked at the door. A young housemaid opened it. Behind her in the passage was the smell of beeswax and something savoury from the kitchen below. "Miss Webb," Ivy said, "I have an appointment with Mrs. Bates at 10:30. The housemaid looked at her basket, nodded, and let her in. Well, she was taken to a small room off the main service corridor, a kind of waiting room for tradespeople, with a wooden bench and a framed print of a hunting scene on the wall. She sat and waited. Mrs. Orna Bates arrived 7 minutes later. She was exactly as Ivy had imagined from Bess's description. Compact, grey-haired, with an expression of permanent mild suspicion that was not personal but professional. She had spent 30 years managing a household for a man like Fenwick, and she had survived it by trusting nothing completely. She looked at Ivy and at the basket. "You come recommended by Patch," she said. "I do," Ivy said. "I have worked with several households in this area. I can provide references if that would help, though Mr. Patch was generous enough to speak for me." "What work have you done?" "Alterations primarily. Curtain work, or household mending. Occasionally new pieces, if the brief is straightforward." She opened the basket and showed the contents. "I work quickly, and I do not charge for return visits if my work requires correction, which it rarely does." Mrs. Bates looked at the basket with the eyes of someone who knew what genuine work tools looked like. She picked up the scissors, turned them over, set them back. "We have a dining room set of curtains that need rehemming," she said. "The last woman made a mess of them. If you can correct the work, I will consider you for ongoing household use." "I would be glad to look at them," Ivy said. She was taken upstairs. This was the moment. The dining room was on the first floor, near the centre of the house, not far from the main staircase. And the main staircase led to the second floor and the east wing, and the third door from the landing. She spent 40 minutes on the curtains. They were not actually a mess. The previous seamstress had done perfectly adequate work, but Ivy unpicked 2 sections and redid them with marginally better tension, and Mrs. Bates, who came to check twice, seemed satisfied. While she worked, she listened and she watched. The household had a rhythm. Mrs. Bates moved between the kitchen and the upper floors on a rotation of approximately 20 minutes. The young housemaid who had let her in was responsible for the front rooms. A second, older maid worked the upper floors. There was a manservant who appeared once, briefly, and then was gone. Fenwick himself was not in the house. She had been told he would not be. He was attending a committee session in Westminster that ran from 9 in the morning until early afternoon on Thursdays. She had a window. When Mrs. Bates came for her second check and was satisfied with the curtain progress and went back downstairs, Ivy counted 60 seconds. Then she folded the fabric she had been working on, set it neatly on the chair, picked up a basket, and walked into the hall. She went up the main staircase. The second floor was quiet, a long corridor with dark wood floors and paintings of landscapes in heavy frames. She counted doors from the landing. 1, 2, 3. She stopped at the third door. Listened. Nothing. She opened it. The study was dark, curtains drawn. She went in and closed the door behind her. She did not light a lamp. She stood still for 10 seconds while her eyes adjusted, and then she moved to the left wall. She pressed along the paneling with her fingertips. Wood, 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 a slight give, wood, more give, and then, slightly left of center, a resistance that was different from the rest. She pressed. The panel clicked softly and swung inward. Inside was a cabinet. On the cabinet's middle shelf was a locked box, dark wood with brass fittings. She reached into the bottom of her sewing basket, beneath the fabric samples, and removed a small roll of thin tools that Oliver had prepared. She selected the right one and worked the lock. 20 seconds. 25. The box opened. Inside were papers. She did not read them. There was no time to read them. She took them out, tucked them inside the front of her dress against her stays, and replaced them with a folded set of blank pages Oliver had cut to the same size and thickness. She closed the box, relocked it, closed the cabinet panel. The panel clicked back into place. She stood for a moment in the dark study and breathed. Then she straightened her dress, picked up her basket, and went back to the door. She opened it. Standing directly outside in the corridor, looking at her with the cold, flat eyes of a man who had been waiting, was one of the men from the ball. The one who had looked at her across the card room and made her run. He was not alone. There was a second man behind him. Neither of them said anything for a moment. Then the first man said, "Lord Fenwick would like a word, miss." Ivy looked at him. She looked at the second man. She looked at the distance between them and the top of the staircase. There was no running from this. Not with two men, not in a closed corridor, not without making a noise that would bring the whole house down. She held her sewing basket in both hands and said, in Miss Nora Webb's plain, unruffled voice, "Of course. Shall I wait downstairs?" The first man looked at the basket, then at her dress. His eyes went to her neckline, where the papers were pressed against her stays, and she felt her heart beat in her teeth. "His lordship is on his way up," the man said. "You can wait here." "Here in the corridor?" she said, with a trace of puzzled politeness. "Is there not a sitting room?" The man looked faintly uncertain. People doing something wrong did not usually ask to be taken to a sitting room. That fraction of uncertainty was enough. Footsteps on the staircase, multiple sets. But when the figure appeared at the top of the stairs, it was not Fenwick. It was Silas. He was dressed differently than she had ever seen him. Not in his usual dark coat, but in something lighter, carrying a hat, looking for all the world like a man who had simply called on a friend at an inconvenient time. He looked at the two men in the corridor. He looked at Ivy. "Miss Webb?" he said pleasantly. "There you are. Mrs. Bates said I might find you upstairs. I have an urgent alteration matter from my housekeeper. Terribly sorry to interrupt." The two men looked at him. The Duke of Harlan looked back at them with the absolute, immovable calm of a man who had never once in his life considered that any room he entered might not welcome him. "I was not aware his lordship was expected today," the first man said carefully. "Or he is not," Silas said. "I dropped in. A habit of mine. Fenwick will forgive me." He looked at Ivy. "Shall we, Miss Webb? My carriage is outside." Ivy nodded. She walked toward the staircase. Neither man stopped her. She did not understand why, entirely, until she reached the bottom of the stairs and Silas fell into step beside her, and she heard him say under his breath, without moving his lips, "The man on the left works for me. He has for 2 weeks. He will tell Fenwick he checked your basket and found nothing of interest." They walked out through the front door like people leaving a perfectly ordinary call. On the front step, in the grey morning air, Ivy exhaled. "You followed me," she said. "I was nearby," he said. "That is not the same thing." "No," he agreed. "It is not." She looked at him. He was looking at the street. A muscle in his jaw was tight in a way that suggested the easy manner he had worn inside the house had cost him something. "The papers are secure," she said quietly. He looked at her then. Something moved through his face, fast, like a flame in the wind. "Good," he said. And then, quieter still, "Are you all right?" It was such a simple question. She had not expected it to do what it did. She pressed her lips together for a moment. "Yes," she said. He nodded. He offered his arm. She took it, and they walked down the front steps together and along Mayfair Street towards the waiting carriage, looking like nothing more than a duke and a woman on a pleasant, if overcast, Thursday morning, carrying between them the evidence that could bring down 3 of the most powerful men in England. The papers were laid out on the table before anyone spoke. Oliver handled them with careful gloves, moving each page slowly, reading as he went. The room was quiet except for rain tapping against the window. Coyle stood at Oliver's shoulder. Constance stood across from them. Denny was at the door. Silas stood slightly apart, watching Oliver read. Ivy sat at the end of the table and waited. Oliver finished the last page. He set it down and looked at Coyle. "It is everything." Coyle let out a slow breath. "You are certain?" "The account records are here. The correspondence between Fenwick and Lord Darcy goes back 14 months, signed and dated. The arrangement with Sir Piers Ashby is in Ashby's own hand. There is a ledger page recording 3 payments to Lord Mableton." Oliver held one page toward the lamp. "This alone would be sufficient. Together they are irrefutable." Constance pressed both palms flat on the table and looked at the papers. Then she looked at Ivy. The measuring quality in her expression was still there, but underneath it, something warmer had opened up. "You did well," she said. From Constance, in this room, it landed with full weight. "What happens now?" Ivy asked. "We move quickly," Coyle said. "Once Fenwick discovers the box has been accessed, he will begin covering his tracks. He will call in favors and move people. We have today. Perhaps this evening. No longer." "Then we go to the Lord Chancellor tonight," Silas said. "Lord Chancellor Hume," Constance confirmed. "He has no connection to Fenwick and the authority to initiate an inquiry. None of the 3 named men can stop once it begins." "Do you have access to him?" Ivy asked. Coyle almost smiled. "I served under his brother for 6 years. He will see me." Oliver organized the papers into a sealed leather case and handed it to Coyle, who took it with both hands. Denny was assigned to go with him. 2 people made the delivery harder to intercept, and Denny's presence made interference considerably more complicated. That left Silas, Constance, Oliver and Ivy at the building. Oliver put together a meal from the small kitchen: bread, cold meat, hard cheese, strong tea. Nobody said much. There was a particular quality to waiting that Ivy recognized: the hours between finishing something and knowing if it had worked. Nor she washed the plates because she needed to do something with her hands. Silas came into the kitchen while she was doing it. He leaned against the door frame with a cup of tea and was quietly present in a way that asked nothing of her. After a moment, she said, "Tell me about the person you lost." She had not planned to say it. It came out the way things did when walls were closed, and the normal reasons for not saying things felt smaller than usual. He went still. She kept washing. "Constance told me something," she said. "Not much. You do not have to tell me the rest." He was quiet long enough that she thought he had decided not to speak. Then he said, "Her name was Anne. She was not part of any operation. She was simply someone close to me. Someone found out she mattered and used that." A pause. She survived. Recovered completely. Oh, she is in the country now with a husband and a son. Another pause. But she was put in danger because of me. That is not something I have found easy to carry. Ivy set down the plate and turned around. "You have been punishing yourself for 3 years for something that ended well," she said. "It did not feel like it ended well at the time." "No, it would not." She looked at him across the small kitchen. "But I walked into Fenwick's house today, knowing exactly what I was walking into. I made that decision, not you." He crossed the kitchen and stopped close enough that she could see his eyes clearly in the low lamplight. Something between storm grey and winter morning. "I know you are capable," he said. "That has never been the question." "Then what is?" "What I'm supposed to do," he said quietly, and with the fact that watching you go into that house this morning was the longest 2 hours I have had in recent memory. The kitchen was very small. The rain was still going outside. "You waited outside the entire time," she said. He said nothing, which was answer enough. She reached up and straightened the lapel of his coat, which did not need straightening. His hand came up and covered hers briefly before she lowered it. Then Constance called from the other room. "Oliver has found something." Oliver was at the main table with a reference book open, and the look of a man piecing something together faster than he liked. "The ledger page records payments to Mableton," he said. "One payment date matches the week a case involving 2 mill workers in Lancashire was dismissed without full hearing, though the magistrate on that case has since been promoted to a senior position." He looked up. "Mableton sits on the appointments board." "So the money brought specific outcomes," Constance said. "Not only silence." "Documented outcomes," Oliver said, "which means people have already been harmed." Ivy looked at Oliver's notes on the table. She thought about her father, a working barrister who had taken the cases that mattered to the people who brought them, lost his practice, not to scandal, but to a slow, deliberate campaign by men who found him inconvenient. She had been 12 when it began, and 16 when it finished him. She understood now with sharp clarity what she had only half understood then. "How many cases?" she asked. Oliver counted. 7, at minimum. 7 sets of people who had gone to the law and been quietly failed by it. Silas sat beside her. He said nothing. He simply sat close enough that she could feel the steadiness of him. She was grateful for it in a way she did not try to examine. An hour passed. Then 2. Oliver kept working. Constance made more tea. At 9:30, Denny came back through the door with rain on his coat. "Coyle is with the Lord Chancellor now," he said. "Has been for an hour. Hume read the papers. He asked for 1 hour to consult 2 people he trusts." He looked at Silas. "Coyle said to tell you he will act. Said he would stake 30 years of reading men on it." Nobody slept. Constance worked through documents. Oliver fell asleep sitting up, and no one woke him, because he had been awake for 2 days and earned it. Denny sat by the door with his eyes open. Silas came and sat beside Ivy on the bench along the wall. But they sat without speaking. It was not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that had been earned. "After this is over," Silas said eventually. Ivy waited. "I would like to call on you, properly, with your mother's knowledge and your permission. Not in a passage or a borrowed kitchen." He looked at the wall in front of them. "In the ordinary way." "My mother's house is not in a fashionable area," she said. "I did not ask about its location. My father was disgraced. I know what was done to him," Silas said, "and I know it was not deserved. I know it shaped you into someone who walked into a dangerous house with a sewing basket and came out with evidence that may correct what men like those 3 have been doing for years." He paused. "I do not care about the street. I care about whether you will let me knock on the door." Ivy sat with that. She thought about all the reasons it was complicated. Then she thought about him, standing outside Fenwick's house for 2 hours in the cold. "Yes," she said. "You may knock on the door." Something settled in him. She felt it more than saw it. Then the door opened, and Coyle walked in. Coyle set his hat on the table and looked at Silas. "Hume will act," he said. "Tonight. He is drafting the formal order for a closed inquiry now. Darcy, Mableton, and Ashby will be notified of their suspension from Privy Council duties before 9 tomorrow morning. Fenwick will be arrested before noon." Oliver lifted his head from his arms and said, "It worked," in a voice not entirely awake but fully certain. Nobody else spoke for a moment. The rain had stopped sometime in the last hour, and the quiet outside was the clean quiet of a city after weather, washed and still. Constance sat down. Denny exhaled slowly and crossed his arms. Coyle poured himself tea with the calm of a man who had been certain and was now simply confirmed. Silas looked at Ivy. She looked back at him. She did not feel what she expected to feel, or she had thought there would be a rush of relief, something loud and releasing. Instead, it was quieter than that. Solid, like a door finally closed properly after a long time of not latching. "Grantley," she said. "Does he know?" "Coyle sent word before he left the Lord Chancellor's residence," Denny said. "He knows." She nodded. Constance stood and went to the locked cabinet where the original letter had been stored since the night of the ball. She took it out and placed it beside the document case on the table. The 2 pieces of evidence side by side, one retrieved by a woman who had no business being at that ball, and one taken from a locked box in a house she had entered as a seamstress named Nora Webb. "What happens to Fenwick's household staff?" Ivy asked. "Mrs. Bates, the maids. They had nothing to do with any of this." "They will be looked after," Coyle said. The inquiry will focus on Fenwick and the 3 council members. The staff are not implicated. And the 7 cases, she said. The people who were failed by those dismissed hearings. Coyle and Constance exchanged a look. That is a longer conversation, Constance said carefully. I know, Ivy said. I am not asking for it tonight. I am asking for your word that it will happen. You have it, Silas said. She looked at him. He meant it. She had learned in a very short time how to read the difference between what he said with weight and what he said without it. That was said with weight. Oliver was sitting up fully now, hair pressed flat on one side from the table, blinking. He picked up his reference book, looked at it, set it down, and said to no one in particular, I should like to sleep in an actual bed tonight. Denny made a sound that was the closest thing to a laugh she had heard from him. Constance began organizing papers into ordered piles with the focused efficiency of someone who processed significant events by immediately doing the next practical thing. Coyle sat with his tea. The room began to breathe differently, looser, the held tension of the last 48 hours releasing in small, quiet ways. Silas touched Ivy's elbow lightly. She followed him to the far end of the room near the window. Outside, the street was dark and empty. A single lamp burned at the corner. The cobblestones were still wet and caught the light in small, broken pieces. Your sister, he said quietly. Polly, or the man posted near your mother's house, will remain there until we are certain Fenwick's network is fully dismantled. That could take several weeks. Thank you, she said. Also, he said, and reached into his coat. He took out a small folded note and held it toward her. From Mrs. Croft, delivered to Coyle this evening. Ivy unfolded it. The note was brief, 4 lines in Mrs. Croft's careful, compressed hand. It said that she was sorry for the thinness of the briefing, that she had underestimated what Ivy would be walking into and overestimated how much she could protect her from a distance, that the coins from the first job stood, and there were more if Ivy wanted further work, that she was, in her restrained and particular way, proud. Ivy folded the note back up. She thought about the night this had started. The ball she was never supposed to attend, the coat pocket she had reached into with 4 seconds and no hesitation, the corridor she had run down, and the door she had not seen, and the hand that had come across her mouth in the dark. Quiet, or they will find us. She looked at Silas. You said that night that you needed a partner, she said. I did. Is that still what you need? He looked at her for a moment with the full, unguarded version of his expression, the one without the hawk stillness, the one she had only seen in fragments until now. Among other things, he said. She tucked Mrs. Croft's note into her pocket. Behind them, the room continued its quiet wind down. Oliver located his coat. Denny opened the front door to check the street and let in a breath of cold, clean air. Constance carried the document case to the cabinet and locked it with the key she kept on her person at all times. Coyle finished his tea and stood and straightened his coat with the precise movements of a man who had completed what he set out to do. Tomorrow will be loud, Coyle said to the room. The arrests, the inquiry announcement. It will move through the city quickly. People will have questions, and most of them will not be answered publicly for some time. He looked at each of them in turn. Tonight we rest. We have done what we came to do. Ivy put on her coat. Silas walked her to the door. Outside, Denny was already arranging a carriage to take her home. The The street was quiet, and the air was cold and clean, the way it only was after a long rain had finally cleared. She stood on the step and turned to face him. He was standing in the doorway with the light from inside behind him. She could see his face clearly. The controlled stillness was there, but it was softer now, less armored. "The door," she said. "You may knock on it Saturday." Something moved in his expression, warm and certain and very real. "Saturday," he said. She went down the steps. The carriage was waiting. She climbed in and the door closed, and the wheels began to move over wet cobblestones. She did not look back through the window. She did not need to. She knew he was still standing in the doorway. She knew it the way she had known things in that hidden passage in the dark, not by seeing, but by something steadier than sight. She pressed her hand briefly over Mrs. Croft's note in her pocket. Then she looked forward at the dark London street rolling out ahead of her, and let herself, quietly and completely, feel that it was over. Not the work. The work of untangling 7 ruined cases and rebuilding what Fenwick had spent years corrupting would take months. The inquiry would be long, and the resistance from powerful men never went quietly. But the night that had started with her running down a corridor in green, with her heart hammering and a stolen letter pressed against her ribs, that night was finished. She had gone in alone and came out with everything. And on Saturday, she thought, there would be a knock at her mother's door. She leaned her head back against the seat of the carriage and closed her eyes. Outside, London carried on in its magnificent, indifferent way, entirely unaware that in the hours just past, or in hidden rooms and borrowed kitchens and a locked study in Mayfair, a small group of people had quietly pulled the thread that would begin to unravel something it had taken powerful men years to build. It was enough. For tonight, it was more than enough.